In a faraway galaxy, trouble was brewing. The kingdom of Valon, home to the peaceful and advanced Sci-Fi race, faced its darkest hour. Their beloved princess, Lyra Valon, had been kidnapped. She was no ordinary princess. She was the key to maintaining peace across the galaxy. Her wisdom and compassion had earned her the respect of countless planets. But now she was gone, taken by Zaxos, a ruthless warlord feared for his cruelty and ambition. The Royal Council of Valon gathered in a grand chamber filled with glowing blue crystals that cast eerie shadows on the walls. They debated what to do next. Some suggested sending their own fleet to rescue her, but Zaxos' forces were too strong. Others proposed negotiating with him, but everyone knew he wouldn't settle for anything less than total domination. Desperation filled the air as they realized their options were running out. Finally, one of the council members stepped forward. "We must seek help from beyond our borders," he said. "Earth has proven itself capable of great feats. Perhaps they can send someone to save Princess Lyra." It was a risky move. Earth was still relatively new to interstellar diplomacy, having only recently joined the galactic community. But time was short, and they had no other choice. A distress signal was sent, carrying a message of urgency and hope. Days passed before a response came back. Earth would send one warrior to assist them. On Earth, Jake Carter sat alone in his small apartment, staring at the stars through his window. He was a man who had seen too much war, but never lost his sense of duty. His reputation as a skilled fighter and strategist preceded him, making him the obvious choice for this mission. When the call came, he didn't hesitate. This wasn't just about saving a princess. It was about protecting the fragile balance of peace in the galaxy. Jake arrived at the United Nations Space Command headquarters early the next morning. The room buzzed with activity as scientists, engineers, and military officials prepared for his departure. A tall officer with graying hair approached him. "Carter," he said, handing over a datapad. "This is everything we know so far. Zaxos is dangerous, and we're sending you into hostile territory. Do you understand the risks?" Jake nodded. "I do." The briefing continued, revealing more details about the situation. Lyra Valon wasn't just a symbol of peace. She possessed knowledge vital to her people's survival. If Zaxos forced her to reveal it, he could destroy entire civilizations. The weight of the mission settled heavily on Jake's shoulders, but he didn't show it. Instead, he focused on the task ahead. By evening, Jake stood on the launch pad, gazing up at the sleek spacecraft that would carry him across the stars. It was called the Stellar Blade, equipped with cutting-edge technology and weapons designed for stealth and precision. As technicians finished their final checks, Jake climbed aboard, feeling both excitement and fear. He had faced battles before, but nothing like this. The engines roared to life, and the ship ascended into the night sky. Below, Earth grew smaller until it disappeared entirely. Jake leaned back in his seat, watching the vast expanse of space unfold before him. Stars twinkled like distant lanterns, and nebulae painted the void with vibrant colors. For a moment, he allowed himself to marvel at the beauty of it all. But the calm was fleeting. Ahead lay uncertainty, danger, and the fate of a princess, and possibly the galaxy, resting in his hands. Jake took a deep breath, gripping the controls tightly. Whatever awaited him, he was ready. Or so he hoped. Jake's journey through the vastness of space was long and lonely. The stellar blade hummed softly as it traveled at incredible speeds, cutting through the silence of the cosmos. Days turned into weeks, and Jake spent most of his time studying the information Earth had provided about Zaxos and Princess Lyra. He learned that Zaxos was not just a warlord but a cunning strategist who thrived on chaos. His forces were scattered across multiple star systems, making him nearly impossible to defeat. As for Lyra, she was described as wise beyond her years, beloved by her people, and crucial to maintaining peace in the galaxy. Despite the weight of the mission, Jake found moments of peace. He would often sit by the ship's viewport, watching the endless stretch of stars and wondering what awaited him. Sometimes he thought about home, about the quiet streets of his hometown and the friends he had left behind. But those thoughts never lingered for long. He knew there was no turning back now. One day, as the stellar blade approached the outer rim of the alien empire, something unusual appeared on the radar. A small object drifted near a dying star, its engines flickering weakly. Jake adjusted the ship's course to investigate. As he got closer, he realized it was a damaged scout ship, battered and barely holding together. Inside, he found a young woman unconscious in the pilot's seat. Her uniform suggested she belonged to the HFY race, and her face showed signs of exhaustion. Jake quickly brought her aboard the stellar blade and tended to her injuries. After some time, she woke up, groggy but alert. Who are you?" she asked, her voice trembling. "My name is Jake Carter," he replied calmly. "I'm here to rescue Princess Lyra." The woman stared at him for a moment before speaking again. "My name is Mia Solis. I was part of Lyra's entourage when we were ambushed by Zaxos's forces." Her eyes filled with tears as she recounted the attack. "They took her. We tried to fight back, but they were too strong. I managed to escape, but I don't know if anyone else made it." Jake listened carefully, his mind racing. If Mia was telling the truth, she could be a valuable ally. But he couldn't afford to trust blindly. Not out here. "Why should I believe you?" he asked bluntly. Mia hesitated, then reached into her pocket and pulled out a small crystal pendant. "This belonged to Lyra. She gave it to me before we were separated. It's proof that I'm telling the truth." Jake examined the pendant, recognizing the intricate design from the briefing materials. It seemed genuine. Still, he remained cautious. "Even if I believe you, what can you do to help?" "I know where Zaxos' stronghold is," Maya said firmly, "and I know how his defenses work. Without me, you won't stand a chance." Jake considered her words. He didn't like the idea of bringing someone else into this dangerous mission, but Mia's knowledge could make all the difference. Finally, he nodded. "All right, you're with me. But if you betray me, I won't hesitate to leave you behind." Mia agreed without hesitation, her determination clear. Over the next few days, the two worked together to plot their course to Zaxos' fortress. Mia shared everything she knew about the warlord's tactics, while Jake prepared the stellar blade for the challenges ahead. They modified the ship's cloaking device to avoid detection and stocked up on weapons and supplies. As they drew closer to their destination, Jake couldn't shake the feeling that this mission was far more complicated than he had anticipated. Maya seemed trustworthy, but there was something about her story that didn't quite add up. Why had she survived when everyone else had been captured or killed? And why had she been drifting so close to a dying star? Despite his doubts, Jake pushed forward. He didn't have the luxury of second-guessing every decision. Lyra's life depended on him, and he wasn't about to let her down. For now, Mia was an ally, and he needed all the help he could get. The stellar blade approached the edge of Zaxos' territory, a region known as the Shadow Expanse. It was a dark and dangerous part of space, filled with asteroid fields, rogue planets, and pockets of deadly radiation. Jake slowed the ship down, double-checking the cloaking device to ensure they remained invisible to enemy sensors. Beside him, Mia sat quietly, her eyes fixed on the viewport as the fortress came into view. Zaxos' stronghold was enormous, a jagged structure built into the side of a massive asteroid. Its surface bristled with weapons turrets and surveillance drones, patrolling the area like mechanical predators. The fortress glowed faintly in the dim light of a distant star, its metallic walls reflecting an ominous sheen. Jake felt a chill run down his spine. This was no ordinary base. It was a fortress designed to intimidate and destroy anyone foolish enough to approach it. "We need to get closer," Mia whispered, breaking the silence. "There's a service entrance on the far side. It's smaller and less guarded than the main gates." Jake nodded but kept his focus on the controls. He guided the stellar blade through the asteroid field, weaving between chunks of rock and debris. The tension in the cockpit was thick, every movement deliberate and calculated. One wrong step, one misjudgment, and they would be spotted. Finally, they'd reached the location Mia had described, a narrow opening hidden behind a cluster of asteroids. "Here," Maya said, pointing to the screen. "That's our way in." Jake landed the ship carefully, ensuring it blended seamlessly with the surrounding rocks. Once the engines were shut off, he turned to Mia. "All right, let's go over the plan one more time." Mia nodded. "We'll use the service entrance to slip inside. From there, we can access the detention level where Lyra is being held. I've been studying the layout of the fortress since we started this journey. If we stick to the maintenance tunnels, we should avoid most of the patrols." It sounded simple enough, but Jake knew better than to underestimate their enemy. "What about alarms? Security systems?" "I can disable them," Maya replied confidently. "I used to work as a technician before. Everything happened. Trust me, I know what I'm doing." Jake wanted to believe her, but trust was a luxury he couldn't afford. Still, they didn't have much choice. Without Maya's knowledge, they wouldn't even make it past the first checkpoint. Grabbing his gear, he followed her out of the ship and into the cold vacuum of space. They moved cautiously across the rocky terrain, their suits shielding them from the harsh environment. The service entrance was exactly where Mia had said it would be, a small hatch embedded in the asteroid's surface. She knelt down and began working on the lock, her fingers moving quickly over the keypad. After a few tense moments, the hatch hissed open, revealing a dark tunnel beyond. "Let's move," Jake said, stepping inside. The air was stale and damp, the walls lined with pipes and wires. They switched on their helmet lights, illuminating the narrow passage ahead. Every sound echoed loudly, forcing them to tread lightly. Jake kept his hand on his weapon, ready for anything. As they made their way deeper into the fortress, Mia led them through a series of twists and turns, always choosing paths that avoided heavy traffic. At one point, they froze as a group of guards passed nearby, their boots clanging against the metal floor. Jake held his breath, counting the seconds until the danger passed. Finally, they reached a junction where two tunnels intersected. Mia pointed to the left. "That leads to the detention level. We're almost there." But just as they prepared to continue, a low hum filled the air. Jake looked up to see a security drone hovering above them, its red eye scanning the area. Before he could react, the drone emitted a sharp beep, and then all hell broke loose. Alarms blared, lights flashed, and voices shouted orders over the intercom. "They know we're here," Jake exclaimed, grabbing Mia's arm. "We need to move. Now." Mia hesitated for only a second before nodding. Together, they sprinted down the tunnel, their hearts pounding as the fortress came alive around them. Jake and Mia ran as fast as they could, their footsteps echoing loudly in the narrow tunnel. The alarms blared behind them, growing louder with each passing second. Guards shouted orders, their voices overlapping in a chaotic symphony. Jake's mind raced. They were so close to reaching the detention level where Lyra was being held, but now everything had gone wrong. "We need to split up," Jake said, glancing back at Mia. "It'll confuse them and buy us some time." Mia shook her head, panic in her eyes. "No, if we separate, we'll lose our advantage. We're stronger together." Jake hesitated. He didn't fully trust Mia yet, but she was right. They needed each other if they wanted any chance of succeeding. "Fine," he said finally, "but stay close and keep your head down." They rounded a corner and found themselves face to face with two guards. Without hesitation, Jake raised his weapon and fired, sending the guards sprawling to the ground. The noise drew more attention, and soon the sound of running footsteps echoed toward them. Jake cursed under his breath and motioned for Mia to follow him into a side passage. The new route was darker and tighter than the main tunnels, forcing them to crouch as they moved. Pipes dripped water onto their helmets, and the air smelled stale and metallic. Jake's heart pounded in his chest, but he forced himself to focus. Every second counted. This way, Mia whispered urgently, pointing ahead. She led them to a ladder that stretched upward into darkness. This will take us closer to the detention level. Jake nodded and climbed first, his muscles straining against the weight of his gear. When he reached the top, he pushed open a hatch and peered out cautiously. The area seemed clear, for now. He helped Mia up, and they continued moving, sticking to the shadows. Finally, they arrived at the detention level. It was a grim place, lined with cells that glowed faintly with blue energy fields. Most of the cells were empty, but in one near the far end, they saw her, Princess Lyra. She sat on the floor, her head bowed, looking weak but alive. Her golden hair shimmered faintly even in the dim light. Lyra, Mia called out softly, rushing to the cell. Jake followed, scanning the area for threats. He spotted a control panel nearby and quickly went to work disabling the energy field. Lyra looked up, startled, her violet eyes widening as she recognized Mia. "Mia, is that you?" Her voice was hoarse from days without water, but there was still strength in it. "It's me," Maya replied, tears welling up in her eyes. "We're here to get you out." The energy field flickered and disappeared, and Lyra stepped out, steadying herself against the wall. She looked frail but determined. "Thank you," she said, her gaze shifting to Jake. "Both of you." Before anyone could say more, the sound of heavy boots echoed down the corridor. A group of guards appeared, weapons drawn. Jake reacted instantly, pushing Lyra and Mia behind him. "Stay back," he ordered, raising his own weapon. The guards opened fire, bolts of energy zipping past them. Jake returned fire, taking down 2 of the guards before ducking behind a pillar for cover. The situation was bad. There were too many of them, and reinforcements would arrive soon. "We can't fight them all," Mia shouted over the chaos. "We need another way out." Jake glanced around frantically, searching for an escape route. Then he spotted it, a ventilation shaft high above them. It was risky, but it might be their only chance. "Up there," he yelled, pointing. "Help Lyra climb." Mia nodded and helped Lyra onto Jake's shoulders. Using his strength, Jake boosted her up until she could grab hold of the edge. With Mia's help, Lyra pulled herself into the shaft. Jake handed Mia up next, then jumped, grabbing the lip of the opening and hauling himself inside. The shaft was cramped and dirty, but they crawled as fast as they could, putting distance between themselves and their pursuers. Behind them, the guards shouted and fired blindly into the shaft, but the trio kept moving, driven by sheer determination. When they finally emerged into a storage room, Jake allowed himself a brief moment of relief. They weren't safe yet, but they had made it this far. Lyra leaned against the wall, breathing heavily, while Mia checked their surroundings. "We're not done," Jake said, reloading his weapon. "Zaxos won't stop until he has you back. We need to get off this rock, and fast." The storage room was dimly lit, filled with crates and discarded equipment. Jake took a moment to catch his breath while Mia helped Lyra sit down on a nearby crate. The princess looked exhausted, her face pale but her eyes sharp and alert. Despite everything she had been through, there was a quiet strength about her that impressed Jake. "We need to keep moving," Jake said, breaking the silence. "This place will be swarming with guards soon." Lyra nodded weakly. "I understand. But I can't thank you enough for coming for me. My people, they're counting on me." Jake didn't respond immediately. He knew how important this mission was, but he also knew they weren't out of danger yet. Turning to Mia, he asked, "Do you know another way out of here? Something Zaxos won't expect." Mia thought for a moment, then pointed toward a heavy door at the far end of the room. "That leads to the lower levels. It's risky. It's closer to the engine core, but it might give us a chance to slip past them." Jake frowned. Being near the engine core meant risking exposure to extreme heat and radiation, but it was better than getting cornered by Zaxos' forces. "All right," he said finally. "Let's go." As they made their way to the door, Jake noticed Lyra struggling to keep up. Her legs wobbled with each step, and her breathing was shallow. She was clearly in no condition to run or fight. Jake slowed down slightly, keeping an eye on her as they moved. "Are you okay?" he asked quietly. Lyra gave him a small smile. "I've been better, but I'll manage. Don't worry about me. Just get us out of here." Her words surprised Jake. Most people in her position would have fallen apart, but Lyra seemed determined to stay strong. He felt a flicker of admiration for her, though he didn't let it show. When they reached the door, Mia worked quickly to override the lock. It slid open with a hiss, revealing a narrow corridor bathed in orange light. The air grew warmer almost immediately, and the hum of machinery filled their ears. "This way," Maya said, leading them forward. They moved cautiously, sticking to the shadows as much as possible. The heat intensified with every step, making sweat trickle down their faces. Jake could feel the weight of his gear pressing against him, but he pushed through the discomfort. At one point, they passed a group of workers who barely glanced at them. Dressed in simple uniforms, the trio blended in just enough to avoid suspicion. Jake kept his head down, focusing on the path ahead. "You're doing great," Mia whispered to Lyra, who was leaning heavily on her shoulder. "Just a little further." But their luck ran out when they reached a checkpoint guarded by two soldiers. One of them stepped forward, blocking their way. "Hold it," he barked. "What are you doing down here?" Jake froze, his mind racing. Before he could think of a response, Maya spoke up. "We're maintenance crew," she said calmly, holding up a fake ID badge she had taken from one of the workers earlier. "There's a coolant leak in Sector 7. We were sent to fix it." The guard studied the badge for a moment, then nodded. "All right, but hurry up. This area isn't safe." As they walked past, Jake exhaled slowly, relieved that Mia's quick thinking had saved them. But the tension didn't ease completely. They still had a long way to go. Once they were clear of the checkpoint, Lyra leaned against a wall, closing her eyes briefly. "I don't know how much longer I can keep going," she admitted softly. Jake knelt beside her, his expression serious. "You're stronger than you think. Just focus on putting one foot in front of the other. We're almost there." Lyra opened her eyes and met his gaze. For a brief moment, there was a connection between them, a shared understanding of what was at stake. She nodded, drawing strength from his words. Finally, they reached a service hatch that led outside. Jake pried it open, revealing the cold vacuum of space beyond. Their ship, the Stellar Blade, was visible in the distance, waiting for them. "This is it," Jake said, helping Lyra climb out first. "Let's go home." The escape hatch opened to the harsh, cold expanse of space. Jake helped Lyra climb out first, her movements slow and unsteady despite his support. Maya followed close behind, scanning the area for any signs of danger. The Stellar Blade was docked not far away, its sleek frame glowing faintly under the dim light of a distant star. It looked like salvation, but Jake knew they weren't safe yet. "Stay low," Jake instructed, keeping his voice low. "We don't know if they've spotted us." The trio moved cautiously across the rocky terrain, their boots crunching softly against the asteroid's surface. The fortress loomed behind them, its jagged edges casting long shadows in the dim light. Every step felt heavier than the last, the weight of their mission pressing down on them. Lyra stumbled once, nearly falling, but Jake caught her arm and steadied her. "You're doing fine," he reassured her, his tone firm yet gentle. "Just a little further." Mia glanced back at the fortress, her expression tense. "They'll figure out we're gone soon. We need to move faster." Jake nodded but didn't push Lyra too hard. She was clearly exhausted, her strength fading with each passing second. He could see the toll captivity had taken on her. Her face was pale, and dark circles shadowed her eyes. Still, she pressed on, driven by sheer willpower. As they approached the ship, Jake noticed something that made his stomach drop. A patrol drone hovered nearby, its red sensors scanning the area. He froze, motioning for the others to do the same. The drone turned slowly, its mechanical hum growing louder as it drew closer. "Get down," Jake whispered urgently, pulling Lyra and Mia into the cover of a large rock. They crouched low, holding their breath as the drone passed overhead. For a moment, it seemed like they might go unnoticed. But then, the drone stopped abruptly, its sensors locking onto their position. "Run," Jake shouted, grabbing Lyra's hand and bolting toward the stellar blade. The drone fired a warning shot, narrowly missing them as they sprinted across the open ground. Behind them, alarms blared again, signaling the arrival of reinforcements. Mia reached the ship first, punching in the access code to open the hatch. "Hurry," she yelled, waving them inside. Jake pushed Lyra ahead of him, shielding her from incoming fire as he followed her aboard. Once inside, Mia slammed the hatch shut and sealed it tight. Jake rushed to the cockpit, his hands flying over the controls as he powered up the engines. Outside, guards poured out of the fortress, their weapons aimed at the ship. "We can't take off yet," Mia cried, pointing to the console. "The engines aren't ready." Jake cursed under his breath, flipping switches and pressing buttons. The ship shuddered violently as enemy fire struck its hull. Sparks flew in the cockpit, and warning lights flashed across the dashboard. "Hold on," he shouted, gripping the controls tightly. With a deafening roar, the stellar blade finally lifted off, its thrusters blazing to life. The ship rocked violently as Jake maneuvered it through the chaos, dodging blasts from Zaxos' forces. One bolt grazed the side of the ship, sending another shower of sparks raining down. Lyra clung to her seat, her knuckles white, while Mia braced herself against the wall. "They're chasing us," Mia yelled, looking back at the fortress. Several smaller ships had launched from the stronghold, their weapons locked onto the fleeing vessel. "I see them," Jake replied grimly. He banked the ship sharply to the left, narrowly avoiding a missile. His training kicked in, every instinct focused on survival. The chase was relentless, the enemy ships closing in fast. "We need to jump to hyperspace," Mia urged, her voice rising with panic. "Now." Jake nodded, guiding the ship toward an open stretch of space. With one final burst of speed, he activated the hyperdrive. The stars outside blurred into streaks of light as the stellar blade surged forward, leaving Zaxos' forces far behind. For a moment, there was silence in the cockpit as the three of them caught their breath. Lyra slumped back in her seat, her eyes closed, while Maya sank to the floor, trembling with relief. Jake let out a long sigh, his hand still gripping the controls. "We made it," he said quietly, though the words felt hollow. They had escaped, for now, but Zaxos wouldn't give up easily. This was only the beginning. The stellar blade soared through the vast emptiness of space, its hyperdrive humming steadily as it carried them farther away from Zaxos' fortress. Inside the cockpit, the tension began to ease, but only slightly. Jake leaned back in his seat, his hands still resting on the controls, his eyes scanning the radar for any sign of pursuit. So far, they were alone. Lyra sat quietly in the co-pilot's seat, her body still weak, but her mind sharp. She watched Jake with a mixture of gratitude and curiosity. "You risked everything to save me," she said softly, breaking the silence. "Why?" Jake glanced at her briefly before returning his focus to the instruments. "It's my job," he replied simply. "Earth sent me to help." "But why you?" Lyra pressed. "There must be others who could have done this. What makes you different?" Jake hesitated, unsure how to answer. He wasn't used to talking about himself, especially not to someone like Lyra, someone so regal and wise. "I guess I'm just good at what I do," he said finally. "And I don't give up easily." Lyra smiled faintly, seeming satisfied with his answer. "Then we're alike in that way." Behind them, Mia stirred. She had been unusually quiet since they escaped, sitting cross-legged on the floor with her arms wrapped around her knees. Now she stood up slowly and walked over to the cockpit. "We need to talk," she said, her voice low but firm. Jake turned to face her, sensing the seriousness in her tone. "What is it?" Mia hesitated, glancing at Lyra before meeting Jake's gaze. "I didn't tell you everything earlier. There's something you need to know." Jake's jaw tightened. He had suspected there was more to her story, but hearing it confirmed made his stomach churn. "Go on," he said cautiously. Mia took a deep breath. "Before the ambush, I was working with Zaxos." The words hit like a punch to the gut. Jake stared at her, his hand instinctively moving toward his weapon. Beside him, Lyra stiffened, her violet eyes narrowing. "What are you saying?" Jake demanded, his voice cold. "I wasn't loyal to him." Mia insisted quickly, raising her hands in surrender. "I was spying on him. For your people, Jake. Earth recruited me months ago to gather intelligence on Zaxos, but when the attack happened, I panicked. I thought I could use the situation to get closer to Lyra and protect her. I never meant for things to go this far." Jake felt a surge of anger, but he forced himself to stay calm. "So you lied to us. You let us trust you while keeping secrets." "I had no choice." Mia shot back, her voice cracking. "If Zaxos found out I was a spy, he would have killed me. And probably Lyra too. I did what I had to do to survive." For a moment, no one spoke. The weight of Mia's confession hung heavy in the air. Jake looked at Lyra, silently asking for her input. To his surprise, she seemed thoughtful rather than angry. "She's telling the truth," Lyra said after a pause. "At least, part of it. I can see it in her eyes." Jake frowned, torn between distrust and logic. If Mia really was a spy for Earth, her betrayal might have been necessary, but that didn't make it right. "Even if I believe you," he said slowly, "how do I know you won't turn on us again?" "You don't," Mia admitted, "but I'm asking you to trust me. I want to stop Zaxos as much as you do. Let me prove it." Jake considered her words carefully. They were already deep in enemy territory, outnumbered and outgunned. If Mia truly was a double agent, her knowledge could still be invaluable. But trusting her again came with risks, ones he wasn't sure they could afford. "Fine," he said finally, his tone clipped. "But remember this. If you betray us, I won't hesitate to leave you behind. Do you understand?" Mia nodded, relief washing over her face. "Thank you." As the conversation ended, Jake turned his attention back to the controls. They weren't safe yet, not by a long shot. Zaxos would come after them, and when he did, they'd need every advantage they could get. For now, though, all they could do was keep moving forward. In the silence that followed, Lyra reached out and placed a hand on Jake's arm. "You're doing the right thing," she said softly. "Trust isn't easy, but sometimes it's the only way." Jake didn't respond. He stared out at the endless expanse of stars, wondering if he had made the right call or if he had just sealed their fate. The stellar blade drifted through the quiet vastness of space, its systems humming softly as it carried its passengers toward an uncertain future. Inside, the mood was tense but focused. Jake sat in the cockpit, his eyes fixed on the radar screen, searching for any sign of pursuit. Lyra rested in a nearby seat, her strength slowly returning, while Mia kept to herself, sitting silently against the wall with her knees drawn up to her chest. Despite the uneasy truce, Jake couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Maya's confession weighed heavily on his mind. Was she truly working for Earth, or was this just another lie? He glanced back at her occasionally, watching for any sign of deceit. Each time, he found only exhaustion and guilt etched into her face. "Jake," Lyra said softly, breaking the silence. "We need to think about what comes next." He turned to look at her, surprised by the authority in her voice despite her weakened state. "What do you mean?" "We can't run forever," she explained. "Zaxos won't stop until he has me back, or until someone stops him. If we don't act soon, He'll destroy everything my people have worked for. Jake nodded grimly. She was right. Running wasn't a solution. It was only delaying the inevitable. But taking on Zaxos directly seemed impossible. His forces were too strong, his resources too vast. Even with Mia's knowledge, they were still outnumbered and outgunned. Mia finally spoke up, her voice hesitant. There might be a way to weaken him. Both Jake and Lyra turned to her, their expressions cautious. Go on, Jake said, his tone guarded. I've been studying his operations, Mia continued. He relies heavily on a network of supply lines, ships that transport weapons, fuel, and other resources to his bases. If we could disrupt those shipments, it would cripple his forces. Jake frowned, considering the idea. It was risky, but it made sense. Without supplies, Zaxos' army would struggle to function effectively. Do you know where these ships are? He asked. Mia hesitated before nodding. Yes, I helped plan some of their routes. There's a convoy scheduled to pass through a remote sector tomorrow. If we intercept it, we can sabotage the cargo. Lyra leaned forward, her violet eyes sharp with determination. Then that's what we'll do. We'll hit them hard and send a message to Zaxos. He's not invincible. Jake felt a flicker of hope, though it was tempered by caution. This plan could work, but it required perfect timing and execution. One mistake, and they'd be walking straight into a trap. Still, it was better than doing nothing. All right, he said finally. We'll go after the convoy. But we'll need a solid plan. And everyone has to follow orders without question. For the rest of the journey, the three of them worked together to prepare. Jake mapped out the convoy's route, identifying potential ambush points. Lyra offered insights into Zaxos' tactics, drawing from her own experiences as a leader. And Mia provided detailed information about the ship's defenses and crew rotations. As they approached the designated sector, Jake addressed the group one last time. This is our best shot, he said firmly. Stick to the plan, stay alert, and don't take unnecessary risks. If things go south, we bail. No heroics. They all nodded, their resolve strengthening with each passing moment. When the convoy came into view, a line of bulky freighters flanked by smaller escort ships, they moved quickly and quietly. Using the Stellar Blade's cloaking device, they slipped past the escorts and positioned themselves near the largest ship. Now, Jake commanded, launching a series of EMP charges that disabled the ship's systems. Alarms blared as chaos erupted aboard the vessel. Jake, Lyra, and Mia boarded swiftly, taking down the confused crew with precision. They planted explosives throughout the cargo hold, ensuring maximum damage. As they retreated, the explosions lit up the darkness of space, sending shockwaves rippling through the convoy. The remaining ships scrambled to respond, but it was too late. Their precious supplies were gone. Back aboard the Stellar Blade, the trio watched as the wreckage drifted apart. For the first time in days, there was a glimmer of victory in their eyes. But Jake knew this was only the beginning. Zaxos would retaliate, and when he did, they'd need to be ready. We struck a blow today, Lyra said quietly, but the war is far from over. Jake nodded, gripping the controls tightly. Then let's make sure we're ready for whatever comes next. The destruction of the convoy sent ripples through Zaxos' empire. News of the attack spread quickly, sowing doubt and fear among his ranks. For the first time in years, Zaxos' forces began to question their leader's invincibility. But Zaxos himself was not a man, or creature, to accept defeat lightly. His response was swift and brutal. Jake, Lyra, and Mia barely had time to celebrate their small victory before the Stellar Blade's sensors picked up multiple ships closing in on their position. Zaxos had sent an entire fleet after them, determined to crush the rebellion before it could grow. The trio watched as red blips multiplied on the radar, each one representing a heavily armed vessel. "We need to move," Jake said urgently, his hands already flying over the controls. "They'll be here any second." Lyra nodded, her expression grim. We can't outrun them, not with so many ships. We'll have to fight." Mia looked pale but resolute. "Then let's make it count." Jake guided the stellar blade into a nearby asteroid field, hoping to use the jagged rocks as cover. The ship jolted violently as enemy fire struck its shields, sending sparks flying across the cockpit. Warning lights flashed, and alarms blared. But Jake didn't flinch. He weaved expertly between the asteroids, dodging blasts while returning fire whenever possible. "They're spreading out," Mia shouted, pointing at the radar. "They're trying to surround us." "Not if I can help it," Jake muttered, pushing the engines to their limit. He banked sharply to the left, narrowly avoiding a missile that exploded against an asteroid behind them. The shockwave rocked the ship, throwing Lyra and Mia off balance. "We can't keep this up forever," Lyra yelled, gripping the edge of her seat. "We need another plan." Jake's mind raced. They couldn't win this battle head-on. They needed something unexpected. Then he remembered something Mia had mentioned earlier about Zaxos' command structure. "Mia," he called over the noise. "Does Zaxos always lead from the front?" She hesitated, then shook her head. "No, he usually stays back, letting his subordinates do the fighting." "Why?" Jake's lips curled into a tight smile. "Because if we can take out their flagship, the one leading the charge, we might throw them into chaos." Mia's eyes widened. "You're right. Without direct orders, most of his captains will hesitate or retreat." "Then that's what we'll do," Lyra said firmly. "Hit the flagship hard and fast." The plan was risky, but they didn't have time for second thoughts. Jake maneuvered the stellar blade toward the largest ship in the fleet, its massive frame bristling with weapons. Enemy fighters swarmed around them, forcing Jake to dodge and weave constantly. Sweat dripped down his face as he focused on keeping the ship intact. "Now," he shouted, launching a barrage of torpedoes at the flagship. The explosives struck true, punching through its hull and igniting fires within. Explosions tore through the ship, sending debris flying in all directions. The rest of the fleet faltered, their formation breaking apart as confusion rippled through the ranks. Some ships retreated, while others fired blindly in panic. Jake seized the opportunity, guiding the stellar blade out of the asteroid field and into open space. For a moment, it seemed like they might escape unscathed. But then, a massive blast rocked the ship, nearly knocking everyone off their feet. Jake turned to see a new threat emerging. A colossal warship, larger than anything they'd faced before. Its guns glowed ominously as it prepared to fire again. "That's Zaxos' personal vessel," Mia gasped, recognizing the design. "He must be aboard." Jake clenched his jaw. They couldn't outrun it, and they couldn't destroy it with their current firepower. There was only one option left: boarding. "We're going in," he declared. "If we can get to Zaxos himself, we can end this now." Lyra and Mia exchanged a look but didn't argue. They trusted Jake's judgment, even if it meant risking everything. As the stellar blade approached the warship, Jake activated the docking clamps. The two vessels locked together with a deafening clang. Grabbing their weapons, the trio prepared to face whatever awaited them inside. "This is it," Jake said, his voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through him. "Let's finish this." The airlock hissed open, and Jake led the way into Zaxos' warship, his weapon raised and ready. The interior was dark and oppressive, lit only by flickering emergency lights that cast eerie shadows on the walls. The trio moved cautiously, their footsteps echoing softly against the metallic floor. Every sound felt amplified, every movement deliberate. "Stay sharp," Jake whispered, glancing back at Lyra and Mia. "We don't know what's waiting for us." They followed a narrow corridor, its walls lined with exposed wires and damaged panels from the earlier attack. The ship groaned around them, its systems struggling to stay operational after the damage inflicted by the stellar blade. Ahead, they heard voices, harsh and guttural, speaking in a language none of them understood. Jake motioned for the others to take cover as two guards rounded the corner. Without hesitation, Jake fired first, taking down one guard while Maya quickly silenced the other. They moved forward, stepping over the fallen bodies. Each step brought them closer to Zaxos and closer to the endgame. Finally, they reached a massive door marked with intricate symbols. "This is it," Maya said quietly. "The command center." Jake nodded, checking his weapon one last time before activating the control panel beside the door. It slid open with a low rumble, revealing a cavernous chamber filled with glowing monitors and holographic displays. At the far end stood Zaxos himself, a towering figure clad in black armor, his face obscured by a jagged helmet. His presence radiated menace, filling the room with an almost suffocating tension. "You dare invade my ship," Zaxos growled, his voice deep and gravelly. "You will regret this." Before anyone could react, he lunged forward with shocking speed, drawing a massive blade. Jake stepped in front of Lyra and Mia, blocking Zaxos' path. "It ends here," Jake said firmly, raising his weapon. The battle was fierce and chaotic. Zaxos fought like a storm, his strength unmatched and his movements precise. He swung his blade with devastating force, forcing Jake to dodge and counter constantly. Sparks flew as metal clashed, the sound ringing out through the chamber. Lyra and Mia provided support, firing shots whenever they had a clear line of sight, but Zaxos seemed unfazed, shrugging off hits that would have crippled anyone else. Jake gritted his teeth, sweat pouring down his face as he struggled to keep up. He knew he couldn't outlast Zaxos in a direct fight. He needed to be smarter. Spotting a weak point in the warlord's armor near his chest, Jake feigned a retreat, luring Zaxos into a reckless charge. As Zaxos advanced, Jake sidestepped and drove his weapon into the exposed gap. Zaxos roared in pain, staggering backward as the blow found its mark. For a moment, he wavered, his massive frame trembling under the weight of his injuries. Then, with a final defiant scream, he collapsed to the ground, his body still. The room fell silent except for the hum of machinery. Jake lowered his weapon, breathing heavily as the reality of what they had done sank in. Lyra stepped forward, her expression a mix of relief and sorrow. "It's over," she said softly. "He's gone." Mia slumped against the wall, visibly shaken but alive. "We did it," she murmured. "We actually did it." Jake nodded, though his mind was already racing ahead. With Zaxos dead, his empire would crumble. But there was still work to do. They needed to ensure peace and stability for Lyra's people and the countless others who had suffered under Zaxos' rule. As they made their way back to the Stellar Blade, the warship began to break apart, its systems failing without Zaxos to maintain control. Once aboard their own ship, Jake set a course for Lyra's home planet, where celebrations and challenges awaited. When they arrived, Lyra was greeted as a hero, her people cheering her safe return. She thanked Jake and Mia deeply, promising to honor Earth's bravery in helping restore peace. Before departing, Lyra gifted Jake a small crystal imbued with energy from her world, a token of gratitude and friendship. Back on Earth, Jake returned to a quiet life, though the stars continued to call to him. He knew this wouldn't be his last adventure among them. But for now, he allowed himself a moment of rest, gazing at the night sky and wondering what lay beyond.